And welcome back to the show. We certainly have an interesting topic. We're talking about the disparity that exists in gifted programs in our public schools across America, and some statistics we have right here in Tennessee. We're talking to Dr. Donna Ford, a professor of education and human development at Vanderbilt University, and Dr. Gilman Whiting, who is also a professor of African American and Diaspora Studies, also the director of the graduate studies at Vandy as well. And you all have done extensive work, as we talked about in the first half of the show, on this topic of the disparities that exist, that the fact that these programs just don't always have the makeup of the true students who might need to be there. And some of it is in the fault, well, we might say, of maybe not, the teachers aren't sort of noticing those students who are talented and gifted, maybe the parents haven't pushed to make sure those students get the right testing in order to be included in those programs. But Dr. Whiting, you had some interesting thoughts about how we can make sure at least our kids are prepared for some of these elevated programs. Talk a little bit about that.
Right. Well, I think there's several factors that go into the underrepresentation. We have the structural that is there, and a lot of that has to do with school buildings. A lot of our students we're talking about are in school buildings who do not offer the program. And it's very hard to get AP, advanced this, or a gifted that if they're not available in the first place.
Yeah.
And then also there's such a rarity that some kids, it's out of the norm for them as adolescents to go into a program where they are the minority again. So to go into a classroom and be one in a school that's predominantly black and Latino, and you go to a gifted program that's predominantly white, and you're the only one there, then you have to deal with the peer pressure that's there as well. So those are some of the structural things that go on there. The preparation of the teachers to actually visually see or to help develop and nurture those gifts and talents needs to be there. And also the families need to see and believe more about their children. But that's very hard to do because we're talking about the intergenerational interesting gap that's there as well. You go back a couple of generations, you don't see any black or Latino students in gifted programs whatsoever. And so the new charter movement and a lot of those things there come up now. It presents itself as a gifted, a private school on public dollars. We all can't fit into a Hume Fogg or MLK.
Right.
Why can't Stratford or one of the other schools be more like that? Why can't Hillwood or Maplewood be more like those schools?
And why can't they?
Well, we have a new superintendent.
So maybe we'll
so
get
maybe
there?
maybe he'll work with those things, and we've been doing this stuff, as we say, for a long time.
Yeah.
So welcome him to our city, and hopefully we can keep him here and get things done. But in terms of solutions, as you started off with, one of the things that Dr. Ford and I did for a lot of time was actually work with some of programs with youth, but academic. We don't need another jump shot star or another touchdown running guy. We need more doctors and lawyers and people that can change policy in the country so that someone like Barack Obama is not an anomaly. We have a whole bunch of people who could actually fill that position, or Michelle Obama for that matter. So I think that one thing we have to do is to have there's a gigantic summer slide, they call it, or summer slip, where students who are already behind in public schools fall further behind in summer. I know my daughter's in 6 or 7 camps during the summer. And when she gets back to school, she's actually more advanced than she was when she left. But a lot of our kids in the city environment, none of that is there. It's not available to them. So we keep expecting things to change, but we continue to do the same bad habits.
Yeah. You know, speaking of the new superintendent, the incoming superintendent, Joseph.
Yes.
I'm praying. I am really hoping that he will tackle gifted education. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but the Metro City Schools, you know, Davidson County is under Office for Civil Rights Investigation for discrimination in gifted education. So this is a legal issue, not just a moral imperative that we desegregate gifted programs in Metro schools. This is not an option. They have been, you know, so to speak, accused of discriminating against children of color, specifically African Americans. Yeah. So it's not an option for the superintendent or anybody in this district to not take this seriously. So, you know, I know we're going to talk about solutions, but just let's look at the data. It's a national crisis, and I'm not hyperbolizing. In the United States, according to the Office for Civil Rights, black students represent 19% of public schools, but only 10% of gifted programs. Hispanic students represent 25% of our public schools, so they're a little bit larger, but they only represent 19% of gifted programs. Both are severely underrepresented in gifted programs. And when we've actually calculated what those percentages mean, we're talking about over 500,000 black and Hispanic students annually who do not have access to gifted programs. That's a lot of students. What are they doing? So that's one. Then you look at Metro, and I'm not picking on Metro, but we're in Nashville. Now, as of 2011, 2012, again, using the Office for Civil Rights data, black students are about 46% of Nashville's school system, but they're only 21% of those in Nashville's, in Metro's gifted programs. That is a huge discrepancy nationally, and it's a huge discrepancy locally. So the new superintendent and others really need to be diligent about taking this issue on. And there's going to be a lot of pushback. There's always going to be pushback when it comes to gifted, programs and giving access to low-income students and underrepresented students.
So I want to make sure we understand when we're supposed to have access to this. So we talked about some numbers in the study about third grade, what happens in third grade. Is this when you have your first opportunity to be considered for a gifted program, and so the testing needs to start back then, and then as you go through middle school and high school, then you kind of grow in those programs, or how does it really work?
Most gifted programs nationally start between second and fourth grade. So again, no consistency, no consensus.
Right.
So in some states it could be the second grade, and others it could be the third.
If you miss that time frame, are you out? If you don't get in?
If you miss that time frame with poor practices, with poor policies and procedures, you got one time and that's it in some states. In other states you might have another opportunity, but you often only have one or two chances in elementary school to be identified as gifted. So it's our belief that the earlier we identify students as gifted, the better. Now I'm not going to say in kindergarten because there's still a gap. Even Dr. Whiting talked about the summer gap, right? The summer loss. So, but definitely, I think around second grade, this is my belief, around second grade, we should have already started, even before that, looking at
Asking
students
those
and
questions.
having these talent development programs, informing parents about the existence of gifted education, going out into the community, especially low-income communities, and even Title I schools and failing schools, and letting them know that gifted programs exist, as well as do the training so that teachers do not have this deficit mindset where they're only looking at what is wrong with children instead of what is, so to speak, right with children and what their potential is. So just imagine being in a very low-performing school. Teachers are not really too often thinking about the students could need more challenge.
But
that training is
aware
essential.
of that student who is a dynamo, let's say, especially in a school that may be struggling.
They should be aware.
There are students who are standing out and sort of pulling those numbers up, right?
But see, the key is they should be aware. But in Tennessee and in some other states, you could be teaching gifted education classes and have absolutely no training. Now that just boggles my mind. You are responsible for taking very capable children to another level, but you have no training to even take them to another level.
So you don't have to be certified to teach a gifted program in this state?
In this state. You do not have to have training.
Okay.
So your principal says, Donna Ford, you're going to teach gifted classes, and then one day you wake up and you're teaching gifted classes.
But
so we have to ask ourselves, even as those who have children identified in this state and district and others, what are our children really getting? We fight so hard, some of us, to get our children identified. What are they really getting? I mean, what is all this fight about? Do teachers know anything about modifying the curriculum? Do they know anything about differentiation? What do they know about characteristics of gifted students? Instead of just picking the highest performing students, the most motivated students, those who have the greatest initiative. My dissertation was on gifted black students who underachieve, and there are a lot. What do we do? You know, so if the student got a C in a class, in some school districts, just a C will get you kicked out of a gifted program, or less.
It's a lot of pressure.
That's
and
a lot
sometimes
of
the students
pressure.
are making the decision that, back to
Yeah.
your point originally, I'm the only one showing up to the classroom door and looking like
Yeah.
me, and all my friends are somewhere else. And maybe you opt out of that opportunity to be included in those gifted
Now,
accelerated programs.
That, and it happens, you know, a child doesn't want to be, that's, you know, just human nature. I don't want to be alienated.
Right.
I don't want to
Yep.
be isolated,
Yep.
especially when you're a child. So that social emotional issue comes into play. But then we also have teachers who don't, some teachers who don't think you should be there in the first place.
Now
So it
that's an
might be
issue.
something like, well, you know, Gilman or Gil, this is, you know, AP English. Are you sure this is the class you're supposed to be in?
Right.
Or, you know, you did a really great job on that paper. Did you do this by yourself? And when you get those comments a lot,
start doubting
you
yourself.
start doubting yourself. So
But
that's
look,
why we need a teacher training.
Wait, I want to cut you
yeah,
off there.
go
We've
ahead.
got like a few seconds left, so I want to continue this conversation, but on the next show. So I'm
right.
going to invite you all back to another show. Let's wrap it up now. Excellent information, Dr. Ford and Dr. Whiting. We're going to wrap things up right now. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it, but we're not going to stop talking about this topic because it's obviously one that is interesting and, to say the least. So stay with us for the next show. We'll see you again next time.